And I can't hear anything. Can you give me a smiley if I'm coming through okay? Can you hear me? Awesome, wonderful. All right, so welcome to the Co-Teaching in Action presentation. We've talked a lot about co-teaching. We've kind of started the year talking about co-teaching, what it is, what it could look like. We kind of moved into different ways to plan for co-teaching, and now we're actually going to look at what it looks like in some of the classrooms. So let's move on to our goals for this presentation. Our first goal is really, oh, and of course it's frozen. There it goes. Our first goal is to identify best practices of co-teaching in the virtual classroom. So we're going to take a look at some clips from some classrooms and really say, you know, these are the things that make this a good example of co-teaching. Also, we're going to do some self-reflecting. You know, what are you doing well? What can you change or adapt to make learning more meaningful for your students? So really taking a look at your own personal way that you're co-teaching and thinking about, you know, how can I make this even better? Now, before we go too far into this, I am going to make this disclaimer. There was a ton of good examples of co-teaching, but when it came to the video clips, if you're parallel co-teaching, you can't record anything that happens in a breakout room. So unfortunately, it was hard to capture any of that kind of co-teaching for this presentation. Another thing that we can't capture in the recordings is when one teacher is teaching and the other teacher is replying to chat messages if it's to specific students. So if the chat was on, you could see that going on, but you couldn't see it there. So there were lots of good examples of co-teaching, but I did just pick 2 clips where you can kind of see a lot of things going on. Just to remind ourselves the different co-teaching models. We talked about the tag team where you might go, you know, every other slide or break up the lesson into different parts. We talked about parallel co-teaching, where you might break the class up in half or into smaller groups, and 2 teachers are teaching the same lesson or a slightly different version in one of the groups. Parallel plus remediation, where you actually teach the lesson in 2 different groups, and one of those groups getting more remediation, maybe a review from the day before. We talked about doing partner work, where one co-teacher would be going in and out of the different breakout rooms, helping students working in pairs together. And then we also talked about pre-assessment, where you see where the kids are at, and then you determine who's going to get this part of the lesson and that part of the lesson. So the first example I'm going to share with you today is Krista Stevens and Jill Schultz. They're doing a first grade lesson, and it's going to be their Message Time Plus. So this is kind of the lead-in to their lesson. As you're going out to watch this video, I want you to really look for these things and think about these things. Beyond the content, what else are the students learning about? So it'll kind of give you an example of, you know, beyond just the content, what else can you teach kids through co-teaching? Also, how do the teachers' interaction engage the students' learning? Watch how Jill and Krista kind of play off of one another so that you kind of see how that makes the lesson more engaging. Go ahead and click on this link. I'm also going to put the link in the chat box in case you need it there. But go ahead out. We're going to come back. I'm going to set the timer for about 4 minutes. There it is in the timer as well. And I'm sorry, I froze there for a second. Go ahead out and watch this example of co-teaching. In about 4 minutes, we'll come back and discuss those guiding questions. I see most of you are back in the room. Go ahead, give a green check whenever you're back from the video. Yeah, I see there was a lot of issues with the sound. When you actually record the recordings, you're using the internal mic and the internal voice recorder on the computer. So after about 10, 15 tries, that's as best as it would go. So I did see a suggestion in there if you use your headphone or your headset that it works a little bit better. So you might want to try that with the next video. Oh, great! You used the headset and it worked. So definitely try your headset next time. Perfect. All right, so let's talk about these questions. Beyond the content, what else were the students learning about? What else were the teachers able to model for the students that would be considered a best practice? Editing, working as a team. Thank you for answering the chat box. If anyone's brave and wants to use the mic, you can do that too. Revision, perioding, positive content, using the word wall. Exactly. Working on revisions and corrections, the partner work, capital letters. So when you have that co-teacher, it's kind of like having that student that wants to give you all those good examples. They talked about exactly everyone making mistakes. So they were setting that culture in the classroom that it's okay to make mistakes and go back and revisit it. They were able to model exactly, lots of modeling the learning, what it's supposed to look like, working together. I'm trying to get through all of them. The conventions of writing, exactly. So if you were doing this lesson by yourself, you would not be able to actually interact with another teacher while you were doing it. You wouldn't be able to model those good habits of learners. So when you have that opportunity to work with your co-teacher, make sure that you're using them to model not only the content and what it looks like, but you're playing off of one another and interacting with one another. How did the teacher's interaction engage student learning? So how did the way that they played off of one another, was that more engaging? The think aloud, the cold calling. Exactly. So when the students are actually able to watch their teachers do these things, that engages them more. They hear the two different voices. They hear them working together. That keeps their attention as they're learning. Exactly. They're hearing both teachers instead of just one. Listening to the dialogue engages them. Exactly. It's much, as I'm sitting here talking and talking and talking to all of you, it's much more engaging when you actually hear two voices during that. Great job picking out some of those best practices in there. Yes, the think aloud and the peer revision modeling. Excellent. So lots of things from that one. We're going to move on to our next example. And this next example is a science lesson. It's going to be Beth Mulholland and Amanda Thomas. They teach second grade together. As you're watching this video, I want you to think about, really watch the Blackboard tools. What Blackboard tools are the teachers using to engage the student? So as one's teaching, what's the other doing? Pay close attention to that. Keep an eye on the chat box, keep an eye on the emoticons, and kind of watch how these two use the Blackboard tools as well as each other to engage the students in learning. Once again, I will pop this into the chat box for you in case you need it there. Amanda, I'm really sorry about how your expression looks on the on that start screen. All right, I'll see you back here in about 4 minutes. Go ahead and give me a green check whenever you're back. If anyone else is having an issue with the video, can you give a red X now? I think it's playing for most people. Some of you are having issues? I would just say maybe yeah, just try. And if you're able to answer those guiding questions and you've seen some of it, that'll be good. Thanks, Kate. Great tip. She said if you hit pause and play again, it seems to help. Looks like a lot of you are filtering back in, which is great, and I see lots of awesome answers coming in through the chat box. So what Blackboard tools are the teachers using? So part of the best practices that are used here, they're using their webcam in an effective manner. They are actually showing the experiment. They're giving those examples, those visual cues to the students. They're using their polling. They're using the chat. They are praising their students. Okay, at no time do you really see like one teacher just there in the distance. You're constantly seeing them prompting, asking questions of the students. So both teachers are actively engaged in the lesson, and this is one of the best practices. They're using all of those Blackboard tools. They're talking in the chat. They're using emoticons. If the kids know that both teachers are supporting their learning and looking for them to participate, it becomes part of the classroom culture to be more engaged, to participate. Kids like to get that positive feedback. So just another example of how using the chat, the emoticons, your webcam, is just going to help the students be more engaged in those lessons. You'll also notice that while one teacher's teaching, the other one is kind of managing those tools as they're doing it. All right. So, co-teaching in the virtual classroom. Now I kind of want you all to brainstorm and post up here all of the best practices that you have seen in these videos. And your master teachers will actually be looking for these types of things whenever they come in and visit your classroom. So I'm going to turn the tools on and go ahead up here and just start posting all of the ideas that you've seen, the best practices that you've seen of co-teaching in the virtual environment. Yes, both teachers on the webcam taking turns doing that, tag team teaching. Like I said at the beginning, the parallel teaching, there was a lot of good examples, but it's you can't see both of them doing that, unfortunately, whenever you go to look at a snip of it. Modeling group work in a breakout room, awesome. Working together, use of emoticons, teachers supporting teachers. Using another one to model a specific strategies, exactly, playing off one another. These are all of the things that you can do when you're co-teaching to really help engage the students, promote student learning, and just make it a better learning experience for the kids. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I also want to give time now for a personal reflection. I have a Google form here for you to fill out, and all of the master teachers will have access to this as well. Because it is a personal reflection, they can use this as part of their coaching whenever they come in and visit you. So just 2 questions on there. What am I doing well? And then what can I change or adapt to make my learning more meaningful for my students? So think about it whenever you're reflecting on your own co-teaching practices. Give yourself some props. What are you doing well? And then we always can change something to make make it better, make it a more meaningful learning experience. Now that you've seen some examples of what this can look like, think about something that you'd like to change with that. This is the link to the Google form. I'll go ahead and put that in the box, and then we finished. Oh wow, I had 4 minutes to spare. I was afraid I was going to go over. So thank you for all of your participation. I really appreciate it. I hope you got a lot out of this session and that you're ready to try some new things as you are co-teaching in your classrooms. So there's your form, and then you guys are you can log off until your next session. Thanks so much. So welcome everyone to the Co-Teaching in Action presentation. I'm glad that you logged in. Just a reminder in case there's anyone that's still logged in from the last session, this is going to start session 2. So if you were here for the 1 o'clock session, you want to pick a different one to head over to. And if you're here for the 1:35 session, then you're in the right place. Okay, just wanted to check something there. So welcome. We're going to be talking about co-teaching and really seeing how it looks and how it works in classrooms. We started the year kind of putting the idea out there of co-teaching and what you can do. We talked a little bit more about how to plan effectively for it, and now we're actually going to see what it looks like in action and identify some best practices when you're co-teaching. So the goals for this session, to identify best practices of co-teaching in the virtual classroom, and we'll do this through viewing some videos. Then also take some time to do some self-reflection on your own co-teaching practices, thinking about what am I doing well, and then also what can I change or adapt to make the learning more meaningful for my students. So remember, in the end, our end goal is always how can we better help our students, and thinking about the best practices of co-teaching, how could we always adapt that or change that or make our practices better to ultimately help our students learn. Quickly, just to review the co-teaching models that we've talked about. We've talked about tag team, where you either take every other slide or different parts of the lesson and go back and forth between your co-teacher. We talked about parallel co-teaching, which is a great strategy to break the class down into smaller groups. So with the smaller groups, you can attend to more students and get more of them engaged. The parallel plus remediation, where you would break them in half and maybe one group gets more of a review lesson or remediation, which is really good to help student needs. Then we talked about partner work, where maybe one co-teacher is going between breakout rooms, helping students who are working together. The other one might be teaching more of a whole group lesson in the main room. Then we also, finally, we talked about the pre-assessment, where the students would log in, they would have some kind of assessment, and then based on how they do right there in real time, one would go with one teacher and get a lesson, where another group of students might go in a breakout room with the other teacher. Maybe they get some more remediation or enrichment or something along those lines. So today we're going to see mostly this tag team. Unfortunately, there were tons of good recordings to choose from that showed parallel, but when teachers were actually parallel teaching, you can't record what's going on in the breakout room. So unfortunately, there were so many good ones that we could have seen with the parallel and using some of these other strategies. But my disclaimer is I just picked 2 where you could actually see some of the best practices going on in that main room. So for our first example, we're going to watch a Message Time Plus recording. This recording is of Krista Stevens and Jill Schultz, who teach first grade. As you're watching this video, some look-forwards or some guided questions to think about. Beyond the content, what else are the students learning about? So the teachers are going to be doing things. They're not just teaching their Message Time Plus lesson, but they're also teaching other hidden curriculum, I guess you could say, as they're doing that. So look for that. Your other look for, how do the teachers' interaction engage student learning? So as you're watching, see how these teachers and the way they're working together engage you as you're watching this video. From the last session, I did learn that the best way to hear this video is if you use your headset. So if you have your headset near your desk area, I suggest you grab it now. That's going to be your best way to listen to these videos. I am going to also put this link down in the chat box in case that's easier for you to grab it from there. And I'll give you about 4 minutes. Just give me a green check when you're done viewing, and we will talk about those guided questions. Go ahead and start giving those green checks as you're finishing up the video. Awesome, I see those green checks coming in. So you can, let's talk about our guided questions. You can either just tell me in the chat box if you prefer that. If you would like to hop on the mic and answer any of these questions, you feel free to do that as well. So let's talk about it. Beyond the content, what else are the students learning about? What are the teachers teaching beyond just the content of Message Time Plus and what's involved in that? Don't everybody answer at one time. There's the chat bubbles. I should have done a waterfall on that. Taking turns, working together, teamwork, exactly. You know, one teacher was even able, problem solving, good, collaborating. How to fix mistakes, checking the word wall. Yes, so they're modeling, the teachers work together to model all of these good behaviors for the students. Beyond just, you know, this is Message Time Plus, we're going to be learning about capital letters and our sight words and this and that. They're also saying, you know, the one teacher makes a mistake and the other teacher says that's okay, we learn from mistakes. So beyond just learning about curriculum, they're also teaching that hidden curriculum and teaching them, you know, setting a culture in the classroom that it's okay to make mistakes. We learn from mistakes. That's an okay thing to do. So that's really important. And when you have another adult in the room with you that you're able to teach that, it gives you a better opportunity to make that learning experience positive for the students. What about our next guiding questions? How do the teachers' interaction engage the students? What did you see with that? Or even as you are watching that, how did that help you engage in what they were teaching? Was it better or worse than how I'm presenting right now where it's just me and I don't have my webcam on? What do you think? Exactly, it's interactive. Exactly, they can interact with the teacher. That's engaging. It keeps the students engaged. So when they're hearing the two different voices on the microphone and when they're seeing somebody on the webcam, you know, this is helping them be engaged in the lesson. No problem, Amanda. Glad you made it back in. It's a very positive, exactly. We talked a lot this morning in the dropout prevention how, you know, kids having that positive experience with school is going to make them want to go to school. It's going to make them want to learn. So using your co-teacher to really establish a positive classroom culture, it's really going to help the kids be more engaged in the learning. They're going to want to come to class. They're going to want to learn. They're going to love to participate. Great, Amanda. Yeah, it looks like Amanda also co-teaches with Jill, and it really helps the kids learn a lot. Awesome. All right, we're going to take a look at another video. This one is an example from science. In this one, you're going to see Beth Mulholland and Amanda Thomas. They are teaching a science lesson, and as they are doing this, I want you to think about these two book fours or use these as your guiding questions. What Blackboard tools are the teachers using to engage the students? So really pay attention to what's going on with the Blackboard tools as they're teaching. Also, while one teacher is teaching, what is the other teacher doing? So keep an eye on the chat box and the emoticons and just kind of see how them using these tools help engage the students. I'm going to put this one in the chat box as well. Okay. When you come back, go ahead and give a green check so that I know that you're ready to discuss. Enjoy that. Make sure you're looking at the Blackboard tools and thinking about what the teachers are doing while the other one is teaching. All right, it looks like most of you are putting up your green checks. So once again, we can just type our responses down in the chat box. What Blackboard tools are the teachers using to engage their students? What all did you see being used? Exactly, the video, webcam, the clapping, smiley faces. Encouragement in the chat, exactly. Objects from home. So they were using those tools to engage the students. Yes, second graders like marshmallows. Why not use that? Yes, repeating important points in the chat box. So you even notice that while one teacher was teaching, the other one is constantly reinforcing in the chat box. They're saying it in another way. So this is a best practice. When one teacher's teaching, the other one isn't just, sitting there. The other one is actually engaged in the lesson, supporting the other teacher. And even though they're not able to talk, or you're not next to a student as you would be in a brick and mortar, you can use those Blackboard tools to support the learners as the other one is teaching. All right, so great job identifying all of these best practices for co-teaching in our virtual classroom. Right now I'm going to turn on the tools, and I'm going to have you post up here all of the best practices that you see today, just as a way to kind of list these things and start talking about these things and really have them in the forefront of your mind as you're planning your next co-teaching lesson. So go ahead and just up on the board, start typing or writing away some best practices of co-teaching in the virtual classroom. Great responses, yes. Working together. Interactive lessons using both teachers engaged constantly. Using the webcam. Reinforcing important points. Responding with emotion or text in the chat box of the teacher's lessons. Using breakout rooms to split up students according to their needs. Exactly. These are all things that you can do and just use the tools that you have to make learning so much more meaningful for students, especially when you're co-teaching. All right. So wonderful. Thank you. Oh, I see some people are still writing. All right. It looks like everybody finished writing up there. I didn't want to cut anyone off. So one last piece, our final goal is to do some self-reflection on co-teaching. So 2 questions. What am I doing well? Right now, give yourself some props. What are you doing well whenever it comes to co-teaching? And then what can I change or adapt to make learning more meaningful for my students? That's always our ultimate goal, is to make our student learning as best as possible. So go ahead on this Google form and fill that out, answering those questions and doing some self-reflection. Once you finish that, you're free to log out. Thank you so much for your participation today. I really appreciate it, and I hope you learned a lot from this session.